Yes, it is. I actually met Elias because he came and did a day-long workshop with a number of us in village government. But today he's here wearing a different hat. He is the founder and CEO of Bronx Element Strategies. He is a fellow of Columbia University Center for Justice and served in the Obama White House. Best advises organizations on social justice reform. Welcome, Mr. Elias Alcantara. Our next panelist, I'm going to jump right over here to Clarence Macklin. You already know quite a bit about, at least from one moment in his life. He is now a youth counselor at Lincoln Hall, and he was obviously a cast member in Sing Sing's production of A Few Good Men. And he was arrested in 1995, then joined RTA as a way out of his misery. His transformation into a respected community leader is one of Dramatic Escape's main stories. Welcome, Mr. Clarence Macklin. And I would like to invite everyone to welcome Ms. Lorraine Muller. She is an associate professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice and, as we have just seen, the director of the play that is featured in Dramatic Escape. She first became involved in prison education in 1997 at Bedford Hills, and she holds advanced degrees from NYU in educational theater and communication arts. Welcome to Ms. Lorraine Muller. I have a feeling that there are probably a number of questions from the audience, and I'm carrying around these papers, so I just want to tell you what they are, and then I'm going to put them down. But as I mentioned, Sing Sing Prison Museum is a project that we are a large group of folks in our community. I forgot to mention Abigail Lewis is another one of the board members who's here tonight. I'll see who else I missed. But if you are interested in learning more about the Sing Sing Prison Museum, there are these pamphlets outside. And there's also a bunch of information outside about RTA. I know it's also a time of year when people are thinking about where they want to donate money. I'm sure that if you had some money you wanted to donate, either of these organizations would probably be very interested in hearing from you in the next few weeks. Meanwhile, I've given you a moment to think about, would you like to kick us off with a question? Everybody wants to be the last question. Who wants to be the first question? All right. There we go. Thank you, Stephanie.
Hi, Clarence. I met you out in the lobby. I just was wondering what it's like for you to see yourself in the movie and how you feel now versus then.
Well, it always feels awkward to watch myself. I always see the things that went wrong, things I could have done better. But it's a good feeling, though. I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. I really enjoy getting the message out that there are a few good men inside and out. I always enjoy getting that message out. I got a lot of brothers back there that I left behind, and they count on me, and I'm counting on them.
Do you still have a role in RTA?
Please wait until you have the microphone, otherwise it'll be a chaotic mess of talking.
Do you still have a role in RTA? Is that possible now that you're on the outside?
Well, I represent on the outside. We do a lot of work on the outside as well, you know, with the brothers that come home. So my role is to be the connection between the inside and the outside. So that's what I do. I'm like an alumni representative.
Lorraine, you started working at Bedford Hills. Correction, I'm over here. You started working with women who were in prison in Bedford Hills, correct?
Yes, I did. I started out with the College Bound program, which was an attempt to bring college back to the Bedford Correctional Facility.
I would imagine that there must be some inherent differences in working with male populations versus female populations.
They are huge. Well, the Bedford Correctional Facility is a really wonderful facility that offers many, many, many programs. And the actual physical plant is rather like a college campus, but it is, of course, surrounded by concertina, and it is a prison, and there are guards. Working at Sing Sing, Sing Sing by comparison is draconian. It's an old prison. It's a spooky prison. It's not pretty. There are cell blocks. There are towers with corrections officers and so forth. And as far as the population is concerned, some people feel it's easier to work with women than men, and others with men rather than women. I find that it is fascinating and inspiring to work with both populations, as different as they are.
Thank you. You have more questions?
I actually was that was my first RTA production that I saw, was A Few Good Men. And I'm glad I saw it in the chapel because I know they changed after that. Okay. So I was happy about that. I don't really have a question, except that it was incredibly moving for me. And watching now the story behind the making of what I saw, kind of out of the blue without a lot of context, I found really incredible. And I was recently inside and I saw Kenyatta, and I've seen several plays since then. And it's been years now since I saw this one, and every time I go back, I see the same guys. And I keep thinking, the cast hasn't changed. And then I remember it's because they're there for a really long time. And it makes me feel lucky that I'm able to come and go, but I also just see such tremendous talent and potential in there. And, I just pray with all my heart that those guys can follow that talent once they get out, and that they do get out in a timely fashion. Thanks.
Elias, you're not particularly involved with this program or at Sing Sing. Your work is more broadly in criminal justice. Seeing this program is so uplifting and inspirational, and gives a perspective on what could be accomplished if our focus was more on rehabilitation in the correction facility than maybe typical. Could you give us, put it into perspective with the criminal justice system more broadly? How commonplace are programs like rehabilitation through the arts or other successful programs?
Thanks for that, and I'm deeply honored to be sitting up here with both of you. That was incredibly moving, and similar to what you just said, it just brings so many emotions to witness it, but strong story. The short answer to your question is not at all, unfortunately. Just to give you all some context, aside from the work that I did for 5 years at the White House, President Obama, which focused heavily on reentry, I was born and raised in the Bronx, so not too far from here. So as important as my experience in the federal government policy is, I value and question more greatly these days my experience growing up in a community that was, of course, touched by many of these issues, and a lot of friends that are still inside that I grew up with, and family members as well. But from the time that I spent in DC, where I had a chance to kind of, in many ways, survey many of these programs, the visit that the president made to a prison in Oklahoma got a lot of attention. What didn't get as much attention was a visit that he made to a halfway house in Newark, New Jersey, to learn about some of these programs, not art-related, but other successful reentry programs. Was a harsh reality that there just isn't enough out there, and we're kind of living in a time where the shift continues to move to front-end reform, to diversion programs, and although the numbers are drastic, 600,000 people a year coming back home from prisons across the country, 12 million people annually moving through local jails, many of which don't end up being charged and end up coming back home. I was surprised working in the federal government and now working on the outside that there is not more attention put on these programs. That said, that's why every program matters. We have a real life example here. And there's many across the country, but there's so much more work to do. And I consider myself incredibly lucky to work for a president that, although we couldn't get certain bills passed that would have provided more funding for programs like this, including specific arts funding, because a program out of California, out of the Actors Gang, the Prison Project, that Tim Robbins and a team of actors run, actually lobbied Congress to get provision into a sentencing bill to provide more funding to programs just like this. But politics got in the way and we couldn't get over the finish line. But to be able to spotlight those programs was incredible. And I'm making a commitment tonight that I want to find a way to support RTA and the program you all are working on, because we just need more attention and we definitely need more on there because there isn't enough.
Yeah, apart from the prison environment, could you give us more details about, for you as a director, what the difference was between working with the male population and the female population?
Unfortunately, working at Bayview Correctional Facility, many of the women are heavily medicated. Of the female population, 80% of them are mothers. And separation, as you can well imagine, between mothers and their children is a very, very, very difficult thing to deal with. Fortunately, within the program, there was a lot of mentoring of women toward one another, and that's what really made the work stick. As far as working with men are concerned, there's always a gender issue. A woman working with men or men working with women, somehow that works out fairly well for some reason. But I find that in working with the men, specifically at Sing Sing, that they are very, very hungry to grow. I can't speak for all men. I can't speak for the men that will remain in the yard for the duration of their sentence. But the men that gravitate to the schoolhouse are hungry to learn. I'm so grateful to have individuals come and not stereotype them as outcasts or monsters. I find that, and some of you may be from this community, that the men within Sing Sing treat those of us who come in from the outside with the greatest amount of respect. I will say there is one major difference between the women that I've worked with and the men that I've worked with. The women were from a medium security and were fairly close to making their way out the door. However, the men at Sing Sing, many of them are serving 25 years to life. I think at one point we determined that the average was 13 years. That's a very, very long time. And perhaps it takes a certain amount of time for an incarcerated person to think, to go through a cognitive process where they are really ready to grow. And that's what I found at Sing Sing, that those who want to move on to become positive
May I have your attention, please? The library will be closing in a half hour. Please note that the computers will be shutting down in about 15 minutes. Please save all your work.
are motivated and hungry to do so.
So this is really a question for any of you, whoever would like to answer. As you know, Elias said, there are unfortunately far too few of programs like RTA. And I think that's partly because of a lack of knowledge and understanding in the community. As you think about that challenge to changing the societal situation we're in, what do you think is most important to change the understanding of the outside and to get people to act. Thoughts on how we do that?
I think that one of the things that we could do to change the way the outside see the guys on the inside, and the way the guys on the inside can benefit or even help society, would be just simply to interact, to get to know us, to not just know me as 9687997, but know me as Clarence Maxwell, know me as an individual who wants to be better than I was. Know me as an individual who has kids of his own, who doesn't want my son to take the same path I took. To know me as the individual who sits on the bus next to you, or stands in the same line in the bank, in the supermarket. Know that I want the same things that you want. I want to live in a safe place. I want to be a safe person in this community. And I want to add on to it the best I can.
Can I just add to that? Well, I think what we're doing tonight as well, I mean, continuing to try to get the story out, but what I've come to realize, I guess I made it sound a bit grim with my first answer of saying there's not enough programs like this, but I would say that the way this field has evolved, even in the 5 years that I've seen it, I'm sure many of you have probably been involved much longer than I have, is incredible. And I would be on calls and in meetings with people that I wouldn't be on any other issue, like folks associated with the Koch brothers and Koch Industries and folks with Nuke, Grace, Grover, Northwest, you know, all these folks that I'm sure there's many supporters in this audience of. But I say that because we're living in an interesting time where folks are coming to the table for a variety of reasons. And if we do, like you said, if we do push folks, expose folks to it, I found that taking folks to visit, go inside, has been so impactful to kind of move the needle on what they think and what it is. But again, there's been a lot of progress, I guess, and there's a lot of different unusual allies working together, but we definitely have to do more.
My question is for Clarence. What are you focusing on now, and what are your goals?
Well, I focus on now, a lot of the things that I do now, I had planned to do while I was in prison. I had planned to, when I was in college, I was going to college for my bachelor's degree in behavioral science. I did that so that I could impact the kids in my neighborhood, the kids that come up under me, the guys that look up to me for all the wrong reasons. I wanted to change that reason. I still want you to look up to me, and I want you to follow the footsteps, but for a different reason and a different path. So I had to put myself on a different path with a new reason. And from RTA, I got a lot of skills, a lot of people skills, a lot of being able to communicate better, and be able to start a program or start a project and finish it, to see it through to the end. It's something that I got from RTA, and that helped me when I springboard from there to college. I went from RTA to Mercy College. When I went inside Mercy College, I took a lot of the things that I learned right in RTA with me, and that helped me. It benefited because I was able to maintain a 4.0 average, first of all. So these social skills that we get from doing these plays, or not even doing the plays, if we just sit in a room in a circle and read a play amongst ourselves, we learn new things, not only about each other, but about ourselves. And it's very helpful, very helpful. So those are the things I focus on now. Now I work with at-risk teens to try to prevent them from taking the path that I take. I work at Lincoln Hall, and I specialize in at-risk teens, bad boys that nobody want to deal with. Those are the ones I want. My whole cottage is full of the ones that no one else can handle. That's my goal, to change their lives.
I have a little bit of a heated question. I think RTA is a wonderful program, and I do think it reduces recidivism. My question is it an opportunity to everybody, or the ones that you feel are going to skew the statistics, are they also given the availability?
Well, in my experience, I was on the steering committee in Sing Sing, and what we do have a waiting list that's probably about 2 years now. You got to wait on that waiting list for 2 years, but it's open to the general public. The general consent, the general population in prison, everyone can sign up. Everyone has an opportunity. We don't discriminate against anybody. A lot of times, in the beginning, we know, unconsciously discriminate against guys that had sex crimes or guys that commit crimes against old people. We was kind of biased towards them, but we learned to be open because we don't really know everyone's story. I don't know the whole story of your case. So we give everybody the benefit of the doubt. So it's open for anyone that wants to sign up. The only requirement is that you have to be free of infractions for at least a year. And that's very difficult in a maximum security prison. So this tells us exactly how bad you want to be here. Because it's very hard to be infraction free for a whole year.
How do programs like this play into advocacy towards prison reform? It's something that I see a direct connection, and it was a little bit referenced in the film, but I'd love to hear that expanded upon.
I mean,
I get it.
yeah.
One more time.
Prison reform was really gently touched on in the film, but I feel like these productions and similar programs really speak to the humanity of individuals in the prison industrial complex, and a lot of times generalizations are made because you just look at the prison and you're like, oh, there are prisoners in there, but programs like this really highlight the humanity and the strength and the skills of the participants. And I'm curious if I don't know if programs like this have ever been highlighted in broader conversations about prison reform.
I don't know if it's been highlighted out here, but inside the prison, and in my experience as far as individuals involved in RTA and programs like it, we reform ourselves more or less. We don't rely on the Department of Corrections to correct our behavior because they don't. When prison, we have to correct our own behavior. And we do that by getting involved with programs like this. We do that by being able to communicate with one another better. And the communication factor is what helps reduce any type of violence in prison. If we're able to communicate with one another better, it reduces the violence. I hope that answered. I know someone has something else to add on.
When we began RTA some 20 years ago, it was a challenge to make believers out of the individuals in the administration. Clarence just said, it's through the work of our executive director, Catherine Vogans, and her very able deputy, Ricky, that through patience and over the years, we have established our credibility as an organization that can be trusted, even trusted to bring in contraband, trusted to work with a diverse group of prisoners, and to work successfully without conflict, without causing difficulties within the prison system. If something goes wrong in a prison program, the program is generally shut down very quickly. The orders come from Albany and filter down, and it's over. And it's really through the careful work of this organization, moving meticulously into, step by step, 5 prisons within the Department of Corrections within the state of New York, and establishing its credibility in each of those facilities, that the work has become recognized in Albany. to the extent that finally there is some small funding that has been available to rehabilitation through the arts from the Department of Corrections. At the same time, there are organizations, College Bound was the first in the Bedford Correctional Facility. There is a prison college program, as you know, at Sing Sing through Mercy College, and it's through programs such as these that departments, both within the state and nationwide, are beginning to recognize the recidivism rates and how they have declined with both cognitive and programs that are dedicated to emotional and personal growth, emotional development. Two studies that have been conducted on the work of RTA have been particularly helpful in giving us the kind of recognition that we needed. One was by Pace University, in which two groups were compared, a control group and a participating RTA group, and it was learned along with the support of the Department of Corrections that more men that had earned their GED that were participants of RTA went on to college programs. So we know that RTA is a kind of launching pad into higher education. A second study was done by John Jay College on both institutional and social behavior at Sing Sing, focused on rehabilitation through the arts. And it was determined through psychological inventories and records from the Department of Corrections that the infraction rates of the men in the program were far lower than the infraction rates of individuals outside of the program. Other psychological inventories revealed that although men in the RTA program before the production were more angry than the control group, that the men in the RTA group afterwards were far less angry. This is on the Staxi inventory report, suggesting that the opportunity to express one's emotions, to have a vehicle for releasing one's tensions in a constructive, artistic way can benefit an individual in terms of their level of anger. There were other improvements noticed from this study that had to do with empathy and the ability for RTA participants to have a superior score on coping mechanisms. If you can imagine what it's like to be in a cast working very hard for 3 months with 20 men that live at Sing Sing, and to be able to get through the rehearsal period without conflicts, without violence. There was a learning opportunity for these men to learn conflict resolution every day through rehearsals as they worked intensely with one another. And so some of these, the findings from these studies have been published, and the studies...
May I have your attention, please? The library will be closing in 10 minutes. If you have any items you wish to check out, please bring them to the circulation desk now. The library will be open tomorrow from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Thank you, and have a good evening.
I will say that clock is 2 minutes slow, but we do have time for one more question. But Elias, did you want to comment on that topic, or did you? Okay. You, sir.
My question's for Clarence. It's funny, actually, I grew up on Hamilton Avenue in Ossining. If you're familiar with Ossining, that's right next to the prison, so you can actually see the prison from where I grew up. And it's funny, seeing that movie was the very first time I ever saw inside of the prison or knew of anyone inside the prison. So I've always thought, like, how could this be working for people, you know? Like, it's almost like another country, like another, you know, there's literally a wall in between us. So my question for you is, what does a rehabilitation system look like in an ideal or a perfect world? Like, where this type of program flourishes, what else goes into that? What does that look like?
Rehabilitation. I'm not quite sure I really understand the question. Just say it one more time, please.
So we know that prisons don't work,
Right.
right? So after someone commits a crime, what should we be doing? What should a prison be doing? What should a prison look like? Or not look like visually, but how does a system like that operate and treat people, and, you know, how is it different from what we're doing now?
I can't really say that the prison system 100% doesn't work. I mean, I think that for the most part, we live in the best country in the world. It's just that we have a lot of things that we have to work out. As far as the prison system goes and what would make it better, I think that if the prison administration would focus on their own ideologies, like as far as care, custody, and control. It's supposed to be the 3 C's that they work with. But from the inside, it looks like all they work with is custody and control. No one cares. So if you could put that upper C back in and just focus on that a little bit, if you treat a man like a man, you get a manly response. You treat him like an animal, you're going to get an animal response. So this is something I think that the prison system itself has to learn. They have to learn that it's not about you just being a dictator. It's not about you just being one that slammed my gate at night every night. There should be something in place to correct whatever behavior that needs to be corrected. Not just punishment. Punishment is never going to work because we're always going to rebel against punishment.
Clarence, thank you so much. That was a really powerful response. And actually, this is a really wonderful wrap-up question. So if everybody could just take this opportunity, as Clarence just did, to envision if you could have some direction, some magic wand to be able to say, how can the prison system be better? What would it look like if I could fund the programs that worked, help people to experience some of what they benefit from when they're in RTA, as we realize that's not the norm. So if you could envision a better prison system, Wayne, tell us your thoughts.
Well, the first thing I would say is to become critical consumers of the media, because the media has perpetuated a negative stereotype of prisoners. As far as what a system of reform could be based upon, I believe it needs to be based upon forgiveness, empathy, and forgiveness. When we can evolve as human beings to be able to understand what it is to be in somebody else's skin, maybe somebody who's been brought up in one of the 5 sections of New York from which many of the incarcerated come from, when we can begin to understand what that means, the lack of resources, the kind of bias and prejudice against individuals in those areas, then I think we can make the next step, which is to establish a system based on forgiveness and second chances.
Yeah, I would totally agree with both of you said, and just emphasize this piece. I think, and this is the way my former boss used to talk about it, is we have to reimagine the way we're serving our communities, or therefore lack of serving our communities. Data after data after data shows. When data shows that you could essentially, there's a strong correlation between 3rd grade literacy rates, particularly of young boys of color, with the likelihood of them ending up incarcerated in their teenage years, in their early 20s. That's a problem. We're spending $80 billion on a system that would provide universal pre-K for every single 4-year-old in this country, and provide a raise for every single high school teacher. There's something wrong with our system. Instead of investing that money and resources and things that we know that work. So I would really take a step back and reemphasize what you just said. We have to rethink the way we're serving our communities or not serving our communities. But as it relates to the prison system as it currently exists, I think we have some very strong philosophical conversations to have about the punishment paradigm, which kind of run true what both of my fellow panelists said, where we have to reimagine the way we're truly thinking about our system, and it's based on the punishment paradigm that clearly isn't working. And then practically, I do want to give kudos to fellow brother Glenn Martin, who helped run the Close Rikers campaign and Just Leadership, which builds up folks who are formerly incarcerated. I'm not going to lie, a few years ago when I first heard about Close Rikers, I was like, what the heck is Glenn doing? What is this team doing? It was hard for me to comprehend the closing of a system that I grew up seeing and that I still see today. And man, he sold me. And I think sometimes we got to push the limit and close institutions like that one's going to close hopefully soon, and recreate systems almost from scratch like we're about to do in New York City. So we got to take bold action, and I think we got to start with thinking about the community, what we're doing in communities that's causing the system.
Thank you so much. And let's say a thank you to all of our panelists. Before we go, I do want to remind everybody, please do join us next month, January 18th, for Room to Breathe. And we like to bring every discussion that we have, whether we're talking about something that is prevalent in the world or we're talking about something that has to do with the environment or our country, or in this case, the criminal justice system. We like to talk about it through a lens of what we're experiencing here in our community. And it's rare that we have a documentary that is filmed entirely in Ossining. But this gentleman's point is really well taken, because you could probably hear people within the walls from Hamilton. Oh, you can't, because you can from State Street. You can from Alpos. You can hear the guys in the yard you saw there. But most of us or many of us in Ossining go through our days without having any concept of what's going on. And there are people who live in our community that work there, or people who live in our community that are living in Sing Sing, and those 1,700 gentlemen do not want to be waking up in Sing Sing the next day, but they're part of Ossining as well. And so it was really, I think, a powerful comment from you that is emblematic of the experience that so many of us have here in Ossining. And I want to give a special thanks to Catherine Vokins, who is here with us. She is the executive director and founder of And I know we have other members, Mickey Shaw and Lorraine are also on the board, and I don't know if you have other board members here with you. Thank you so much for all the work that you do for RTA and for bringing us this wonderful documentary. And also the Sing Sing Prison Museum was mentioned. We have a number of board members. If you would just raise your hand one more time, I saw at least 4 or 5 of you. The Sing Sing Prison Museum project, integral to the mission there is to be a center for justice and to have more of these conversations and more conversations about rehabilitation and reentry. So thank you to everybody in our community, whatever you're doing in our community to help us make this more of a common conversation so that more of us know what's going on and how we can help. Look forward to seeing many of you this month.